Tilted the what-if Liet scale. Kynes terraforming was a weapon, not a salvation. The Nabe's son, bound to Arrakis' breath, charted a future where dunes bloomed but his journals whisper of a silent calculus. He knew the Fremen's survival hinged on balance, tilted the what-if Liet scale. A paradox to save their world, he engineered its unraveling. Each well dug, each storm tamed, carved paths to a fate no shadow could outrun. What did Kynes truly plant beneath those first saplings, a cradle or a grave? Kynes' hand shaped Arrakis' breath, yet his mind traced a deeper spiral. The spice sandworm cycle, unspoken, bound Fremen fate to a timer. Bene Gesserit seeds planted not in soil, but in silent assemblage hoarded across millennia. Every drop of water, every breath of dust became a thread in a net. The Fremen thrived because spice flowed. The Fremen died because spice must flow. How many generations walked this knife's edge, unaware their survival was the plan's fulcrum? Golden path or gilded cage, the cost of balance was never meant to be seen. In Dune's 10,191 AG, under House Corrino's iron rule, Liet Kynes walked two paths. By title, a galactic planetologist. By blood, a Fremen Nabe's son. His public deed studying Arrakis' Dunnis masked a truth. He authored the Fremen's slow, generational terraforming. His journals, buried in sand and silence, held blueprints to turn desert into garden, but this design bore a fault. To save one people, he doomed their identity. The Fremen's survival hinged on their extinction as desert-born souls. A paradox woven into every water-harvesting spore, every wind-trapping tree. Kynes called it balance. The Bene Gesserit called it the golden path. Yet neither saw the price etched in his equations. A world reborn would have no place for its original architects. Their culture, their struggles, their very name washed away by the rains he stole from the sky. What does a savior become when his cure is also the death rite? Kynes' legacy was not a gift. It was a requiem sung in sand and slow time. The Fremen did not inherit Arrakis, they became its forgotten ghost. The field reports are precise. The sandworms, he admits, are not predators but architects. Their movements bind the dunes, their breath cycles the water, their bodies cradle the spice. Yet in the margins a hand not his scribbles warnings, faint, smudged by time or purpose. He called it asterisk stability asterisk. A planet's right to balance, but balance for whom? The spice fuels Fremen survival, yes, but its bloom is a slow fuse. Kynes knew the math, more water, fewer worms, less spice. Less spice, what then? The journals, when they surface decades later, bear no direct admission, yet equations whisper their guilt. He calculated the extinction not of worms, but of asterisk dependence asterisk. The Fremen, he feared, had become a species of shadows shaped by scarcity, sustained by poison. To save Arrakis was to dissolve its children into air, a paradox buried in benevolence. The same hands that mapped the wells of Dune also drew the lines of their erasure. The Fremen called him asterisk Mahdi asterisk. They did not hear the silence between his words. The spice, he wrote, is a gom jabbar, sweet, deadly, necessary. The final report closes with a single phrase, asterisk let the desert choose. Asterisk no one asks what the desert chooses when given no alternatives. No one asks what Kynes saw in the sand, shifting not toward life, but toward the long, silent death of a people. The worms stir, the spice bleeds, the Fremen breathe, and the planet waits. The terraformer's pen etched more than rivers. Kynes charted a slow unraveling, his equations balancing not just sand and rain, but the weight of a people's soul. Lato Roman II sand trout did not complete the cycleth, he rewrote it. What Kynes buried in his final reports between lines of hydrological hope was a truth sharper than any thumper's beat. Stability is a cage. The Fremen prayed to the spice-maker balance, unaware their gods were counters in a larger account. Leto, decades later, would call this alignment the necessary wound. Kynes called it silence. A man who shaped a world could not unsee its end. He watched his disciples breed into abundance, their numbers swelling like the aquifers had conjured. Each well-dug hand, each Sietch-born breath, became a thread in Leto's later noose. The sand trout, those living sutures, would stitch the Fremen's fate to the planet's bones. Kynes knew or suspected. His last private note, scrawled in the dust of a dying well, read only, *Balance is a blade. Leto's golden path required the Fremen to become myth, their culture a ghost in the machine of survival. Kynes' terraforming was no rebellion, it was the first draft of that myth. He gave Arrakis life, then let it wait, the worms stir. The spice bleeds, the Fremen breathe, and the planet complies. What does a savior owe the ghosts he must become? What if salvation is a thread woven with erasure? Kynes carved his name into Arrakis' bones as savior. Beneath that he buried a truth: to make rain was to kill the worms. To kill the worms was to break the spice. To break the spice was to choke the Fremen's breath. The spice maker sandtrout cycle Arrakis' hymn, its heartbeat was no accident, it was covenant. Each grain of spice a prayer, each worm a psalm, each sandtrout a verse in the planet's liturgy. Kynes knew. His journals hum with calculations, terraforming slow unraveling. He did not dream of gardens, he dreamed of ghosts. The Fremen called him *Maudib*. Their whispered prayers clung to his promises. Unseen hands Bene Gesserit, Emperor, oraclewove his designs into their own. He alone bore the weight of the unspoken, that water and wind would dissolve the Fremen into myth. Villeneuve's worms writhe as gods, their scale a dirge for what must die to birth a new world. Their jaws do not tear. They suture they complete *. To erase them is to erase the Fremen's becoming. Kynes' paradox: to save Arrakis he had to let it die. To save the Fremen he had to let them vanish. What does a savior do when the cure is the poison? When the saved are the lost, the spice runs, the worms stir. The Fremen pray and the world holds its breath, a blade hidden in a seed, a requiem dressed as dawn. The journals remain silent where silence is least forgiving. No ink stains the pages confirming Kynes' gaze met his own extinction. Yet the paradox festers. A man who mapped Arrakis' pulse to the final dune, who whispered to sandworms in a language only death understands, left no warning for the children of the storm. Did he believe the Fremen could outrun the tide he summoned? Or did he carve their name into the bones of a world destined to forget it? The terraformer's hands planted both harvest and pyre. His public vows sang of salvation, his calculations hummed with the arithmetic of absence. The spice would wane, the worms would follow. The air, once thick with venom, would breathe life into conquerors who never knelt. But the journals offer no confession, no requiem, only equations, only hope, a scientist's faith that balance might spare what he could not. The Fremen prayed to a god who turned the desert green. They did not see the greenery as a shroud. They did not know the seed he buried was not theirs. The greenery spread like a plague of chlorophyll, veiling sandstorms in canopies of thornbush and fog. Kynes' public face preached balance, hydrate the dunes, cultivate oases, let the Fremen claim their promised Eden. Privately, he charted the collapse of the spice cycle. His subterranean vaults held equations proving that once the sand settled, the worms would wither. Without worms, no spice. Without spice, the Fremen's rituals, their water rituals, their entire covenant with the desert, would calcify into dust. He knew the Bene Gesserit's plans stretched beyond emperors and breeding programs. It was a clockwork buried in geology, its gears turning through epochs. His terraforming was a cog in that machine. He did not calculate the Fremen's extinctio numbers could quantify that, but he understood their survival hinged on a razor's edge. Every water harvest he taught them, every Sietch expanded into the dunes, was a thread in a tapestry that would one day strangle them. The spice harvests grew erratic, the worms grew fatter, then weaker, their carapaces splitting under the weight of moisture they could not digest. The Fremen called it the Shai-Hulud's hunger shifting, a myth Kynes let stand. He watched from his glass-walled sanctum, its walls etched with schematics of a world he would not live to see. His final report to the Emperor listed ecological stability as achieved. Now the Sietch dwellers dig in the wrong strata, chasing spice that no longer blooms. Their prayers to the worm go unanswered. The greenery swallows their graves. The Sietch dwellers dig in the wrong strata. Their prayers to the worm go unanswered. Kynes' paradox was not in terraforming Arrakis, but in knowing its final cost. He spoke of balance, he wrote of survival. Yet his secret blueprints charted a future where the Fremen's breath would choke on their own salvation. Greenery rising meant the end of the stillsuits, the end of the water covenant, the end of the people who became the desert. His journals whisper of a necessary storm, a storm that would wash away the very species he pretended to protect. Paul Atreides' rise was not unique, it was a rehearsal, a warning etched in blood and sand. The Golden Path demanded monsters to safeguard the Imperium's fragile order. Kynes understood what the Bene Gesserit could not, that a Messiah's power is a poison, and the Fremen's strength a flame that must be snuffed. Yet in erasing them, he armed them. Their sacrifice forged a legacy sharper than any thumper's tooth. When the greenery swallows their graves, it also cradles a force capable of toppling thrones. What does it mean to save a species by ensuring its end? The Fremen's extinction is not an ending, it is a transformation. Kynes' design was no weapon, it was a crucible, and from it the Imperium's reckoning takes root. Kynes' public creed preserved the desert, his secret truth, the desert preserves its own. Bene Gesserit whispers speak of a plan woven through generations of tapestry, where Paul's Messiah fire burned too bright, too swift. What if the Fremen's survival hinged not on sandworms or stillsuits, but on their erasure, a species remade to outlast its purpose? Paul's rise was no triumph, it was a relay. The journals, buried deep, hold equations that defy Arrakis' logic. Did Kynes engineer a future where water and spice and blood merged into something other? The answer festers beneath every dune. Was the Terraformer a prophet or a midwife to oblivion? The sands remember. What do they whisper to you? Kynes' public creed preserved the desert. His secret truth, the desert preserves its own. Bene Gesserit whispers speak of a plan woven through generations of tapestry, where Paul's Messiah fire burned too bright, too swift. What if the Fremen's survival hinged not on sandworms or stillsuits, but on their erasure, a species remade to outlast its purpose? Paul's rise was no triumph, it was a relay. The journals, buried deep, hold equations that defy Arrakis' logic. Did Kynes engineer a future where water and spice and blood merged into something other? The answer festers beneath every dune.